the character who says he wants nothing. In a world where everyone shouts their dreams, where ambition is treated as an absolute virtue, there is a character who chooses silence. Shikamaru Nara does not want to be Hokage. He does not want to be the strongest. He does not want to prove anything to anyone. He looks up at the sky, watches the clouds, and repeats the same phrase like a defensive mantra. How troublesome. But what if this isn't laziness? What if this isn't a lack of motivation? What if Shikamaru is not someone who doesn't know what ambition is, but someone who understands its price far too early? The intelligence that gets tired before it dreams. Shikamaru is born with something rare, a mind that sees too far ahead. While other characters learn by making mistakes, Shikamaru anticipates consequences. He sees scenarios, losses, costs, outcomes. And here lies a harsh psychological truth. The more someone understands the world, the harder it becomes to want to dominate it. Ambition is often born from illusion, from the idea that climbing is worth it, that the top is rewarding. Shikamaru does not live under that illusion. He sees what comes with power, responsibility, irreversible decisions, guilt, deaths that must be carried. That is why he does not run. Not because he can't, but because he knows exactly where the race leads. Fear disguised as disinterest. Shikamaru's lack of ambition is not empty, it is functional. Psychologically, this is adaptive avoidance. When the mind chooses the path of least emotional cost, wanting little means, losing little, failing little, suffering less. Or at least, that's how it seems. Shikamaru does not say, I'm afraid. He says, it's not worth the effort. But behind that lies an unspoken question. Is it worth wanting something if wanting means losing people? The emotional childhood of someone who thinks too much. While other characters grow up craving recognition, Shikamaru grows up observing the weight of the adult world. He sees exhausted leaders. He sees orders that cost lives. He sees wars decided by necessary strategies. He learns early that someone always pays the price, and it is usually the one who obeys. So he chooses not to desire the kind of power that forces others to follow. This is not a lack of ambition. It is a rejection of the moral cost of ambition. The moment ambition demands its debt. Asuma's death does not turn Shikamaru into an ambitious man. It turns him into a conscious one. In that moment, the world demands what he tried to avoid his entire life, to lead, to decide, to accept consequences. And Shikamaru discovers something devastating. Even those who do not want responsibility can still be crushed by it. The absence of ambition does not protect him from pain. It only leaves him less prepared for it. The invisible cost of wanting nothing here lies the central point. Not having ambition does not mean paying no price. It means paying a different price. Quieter, more internal. Shikamaru's cost is not defeat, it is renunciation. Versions of himself that never existed, past never taken leadership postponed until it is imposed potential, used only when there is no choice. He does not suffer because he failed. He suffers because he knows he could have been more. And that weighs heavily. Intelligence used to reduce pain, not to grow. Shikamaru uses his brilliance not to conquer the world, but to make life bearable. He chooses shorter routes, efficient plans, minimum effort with minimum risk. This is not the mind of a coward. It is the mind of someone who does not want to lose himself. But there is a trap here. When intelligence is used only to avoid pain, it also avoids growth. The human dilemma. Reflected in Shikamaru, Shikamaru represents millions of real people. Intelligent, capable, talented, who say, I don't want much. Not because they can't, but because they know how much wanting costs. They confuse peace with the absence of ambition, without realizing that sometimes peace also demands confrontation. Does he really not know what ambition is, or does Shikamaru know too much? Perhaps he knows that ambition is not just desire. It is responsibility for everything that comes afterward. Perhaps he understands that rising means distancing yourself, leading means losing, deciding means carrying invisible debt on your back, and perhaps that is why he hesitates. When not choosing also becomes a choice, life, however, does not allow eternal neutrality. At some point, Shikamaru is pushed forward, not because he wants to, but because the world demands it. And then emerges the greatest cost of not having ambition. When you don't choose to grow, others choose for you. Silent maturity. Shikamaru never becomes ambitious in the classic sense. He does not start craving power. He starts accepting responsibility, and that is different. His evolution is not about wanting more, it is about stopping the flight from who he already is. Shikamaru is not a character about laziness, he is a character about restraint, about holding back one's own potential to avoid bleeding emotionally. And the story asks us, in silence, how many times did you say you didn't want much? when in truth you were afraid of what wanting would force you to become. The greatest risk, perhaps the greatest risk in life, is not wanting too much, but wanting so little that you never discover who you could have been. Shikamaru teaches us that ambition without awareness destroys, but the total absence of ambition also has a cost, because living too lightly sometimes means living too small, and choosing to want nothing does not free you from pain. It only distances you from the possibility of a fully lived life. When not wanting becomes a form of control, there is something rarely said about people like Shikamaru. Not wanting is also a form of control. Those who don't want much do not expose themselves, do not create expectations, do not have to deal with major frustrations. The absence of ambition works as a psychological shield, a silent agreement with life. I don't ask for much, so don't ask much of me. Shikamaru lives exactly within this invisible contract, but the problem with every shield is that it also blocks what could transform you. The dangerous comfort of living below your potential. Living below your potential feels safe. It is predictable. It is manageable. Shikamaru knows he could be more, and precisely because he knows this, he avoids it, because trying and failing hurts, but not trying and knowing you could have tried hurts in a slower way, a kind of pain that doesn't bleed, but corrodes. This is the pain carried by people too intelligent to be fooled and too tired to dream. Ambition as emotional risk. Ambition is not just about wanting to grow, it is about accepting the possibility of disappointing yourself. Shikamaru avoids that. He does not fear public failure, he fears internal failure, looking at himself and realizing he gave everything he had, and it still wasn't enough. So he chooses a safer path, not giving everything, not wanting everything, not risking everything, but this path charges interest. The price of not assuming your true size. There is a specific loneliness in consciously shrinking yourself. Shikamaru understands others better than they understand themselves. He sees strategies, he sees mistakes, he sees solutions, but he does not always allow himself to occupy the place that would naturally be his, and this creates a silent internal conflict. Knowing he could help more but not wanting to carry more weight, feeling guilt for stepping back and relief for not stepping forward. This ambivalence is exhausting. When the world demands what you avoided, life has a cruel habit. It demands exactly what we try to avoid. Shikamaru spends much of his life saying he doesn't want to lead, and ends up leading. He says he doesn't want to decide, and ends up deciding. He says he wants a simple life, and finds himself in the complexity of war. Here is the real cost of not having ambition. You don't prepare emotionally for what sooner or later will be demanded of you. The difference between ambition and responsibility. Shikamaru never develops ambition in the classic sense, but he develops something heavier. Responsibility without desire. He does not want power, but he accepts the burden, and this creates a particular kind of exhaustion, doing what must be done without it feeding the spirit. This is adulthood in its rawest form. When talent becomes obligation. When someone is very good at something, talent stops being an option and becomes a moral obligation. Shikamaru feels this deeply. He knows that if he doesn't act, others will suffer. So he acts, not out of ambition, but out of guilt and awareness. This is a burden few characters carry, not fighting for glory, but because doing nothing would be unforgivable. The question Shikamaru never asks out loud. There is a question that echoes behind every how troublesome. What if I had wanted more from the beginning? Would I have suffered earlier? Would I have lost less later? Would I have known myself better? This question is never answered, because there is no safe answer. And perhaps that is the most human thing of all. The ambition that arrives too late. Shikamaru never becomes ambitious, but something changes. He allows himself to accept who he already is, not because he desires power, but because he understands that hiding from his own potential also hurts others. This is not youthful ambition, it is painful maturity. The final mirror Shikamaru represents everyone who says, I don't need much to be happy. And maybe that is true, but the story whispers another question. How much of you was left out of that happiness because it was too small? Shikamaru shows us that. Blind ambition destroys, but total absence of ambition also limits. Balance is not wanting everything nor wanting nothing. It is recognizing when fear disguises itself as disinterest. The closing truth. Maybe Shikamaru was never lazy. Maybe he was simply someone who understood too early the weight of wanting and spent too long trying to avoid it. But in the end, he learns the hardest truth. Not using your full potential also hurts. And sometimes, the price of not having ambition is living a life that is too safe to be fully alive.